I'm Jill Lhotka. I'm an ex-student of Madame Nicolai Legat, and I'm sitting having a conversation with Joy Camden, who was a student of Nicholas Legat. Firstly, Joy, I'd like to just ask you, are you teaching today?
Yes, I am.
And where would that be?
I'm teaching at the Kirkwood Academy in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, in British Columbia.
And is it your own school, or?
No, I'm teaching for the directors who are from South Africa, Carolyn and Lindsay Martin, and they were both involved with the companies in South Africa, with K-Bab and with Pat in Johannesburg. He as a scenic designer and she as a soloist.
So you're very occupied still today.
I'm still very occupied.
Okay, now I'd like to take you back many years. I think I can say many years, but
many years.
To the years that you spent with Nicholas Legat, and I'd like to know roughly what year was that you first met him?
It must have been 1934.
And how was it that you came to go to Nicholas Legat?
Well, I went in for a lot of festivals in those days, competitions, whatever you like to call them. And I went to this one in East London, Stratford, and the adjudicator was Flora Fairbairn, and she called my teacher afterwards, who was Linda Lindowska. And Lindowska, whose real name was Winifred Linder, had been with the Pavlova Company for 11 years. And so I was basically Russian Remotion trained because of her background. And Flora Fairbairn said, I must take you to the great maestro Nicolai Legat. And we were all a bit taken aback, but anyway, a date was made and off I went, and to my amazement and great joy, really, he said he would teach me, providing I stayed with my original teacher as well. So first I went to his children's class. He had a children's class, if I remember rightly, it was 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5:15. And I did that for 6 months.
Roughly how old were those children?
I suppose they ranged from about 9 to sort of 14. Mm-hmm. There were people that some people may still know. There was Alan Carter, and there was Maria Britneva, and there were a child called Mila, I don't remember her other name, who was Russian, and I don't think she ever did anything in the profession. I never heard of her again. And there were people like, oh dear, I've gone sort of slightly blank suddenly. Oh, Ursula Miners and Helen Davidson and who was the fourth one? No, I don't remember. It's so long ago. I was 9.
Well, you have perfectly right to not remember all the names. I wouldn't either. But could you tell me, when you went to see him that day, did he ask you to dance, or what did he ask you to do?
Oh, he asked me to dance.
He did.
Yes, he asked me to dance, and excuse me. And he said that he would very much like to teach me. I was somewhat of a child prodigy, I think, horrible things. And so he was very pleased. And I wore a little blue tunic, because in those days we used to wear tunics. That was donkeys years ago. So he called me Little Blue Girl, because I wore a blue tunic. which was the uniform of my school with Linden and Lhotka. And then after 6 months, this was sort of late spring or early summer, if I remember rightly. And then after 6 months in the fall, in the autumn, he said, why didn't I go to the class of perfection on Saturday mornings? And then, of course, life became exciting, very exciting, because then I went on Saturday mornings, and then there were all the professionals there, people from the then Sadler's Wells, people like Harold Turner, Mary Honer, Elizabeth Miller, June Beer, who later became June Bray, Peggy Hookham, who later became Margot Fontaine, Andrei Glevsky, Keith Lester, Stanley Judson, Molly Lake, Travis Kemp, Kathleen Crofton, and the whole slew of dancers of that era came to Legat classes. And then, of course, I mustn't forget Vera Volkova, because Vera Volkova became such a well-known teacher in much later years. She had recently arrived from Shanghai, and I don't know whether you know the story of Vera Volkova, which I only discovered myself when I was on an examining tour including Hong Kong, and apparently she escaped from Russia at the end of the revolution with her family and grew up in Shanghai and became a nightclub dancer.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know she was a nightclub dancer.
Yeah, she was a nightclub dancer. She did sort of adagio, which of course was all the fashion in those days, that day and age. And I actually have quite a lot of photostated pieces of paper that they gave me in Hong Kong, taken from the newspapers at that time. Absolutely fascinating. And then she came to London, and she must have just arrived, because she came to class every day, which I discovered later after I went every day. Anyway, I'm digressing. So I went to this Saturday morning class. So that went on for until I was coming up to 12, which would have been in 1935. So I was born in 23, 35. And my parents moved to West London, near the studio, so that I could study every day. I left school, not a very good idea, I don't think, in hindsight, but I left school and I had school lessons at home, and so that I could go to his class perfection every day, attend his character classes, which were twice a week in the middle of the afternoon, and have a private lesson once a week.
Did he do pas de deux classes as well?
Not as such, no, not as such, no. I don't know. No, we actually never did any pas de deux.
That's interesting. Yes. Particularly as he was a man, it's sort of interesting that he didn't...
yes, well, he very seldom got up from his piano, of course, because he played.
Yes, he played for his own classes?
He played for his own classes, and he gave his exercises out on the top of the piano with his hands, and he had a big cloth over his beautiful grand piano, so that we could all lean on it and do it with our hands as well, and that it didn't get beaten by...
It's amazing how you can do this and understand, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And of course his English was very hit and miss.
He hadn't been in London really that long, had he?
No, but he never really did speak English. He had silly little expressions which were very, very obvious. Some of them I remember. He used to say things like, "Why you look like monkey?" And then if you did a bad attitude, he would say, "You look like little dog at lamppost."
So he learned enough English for that.
And then another one was his, "Why your leg like spaghetti?"
But his classes, they obviously weren't so different from what you had learned, which was a great asset for you. But what kind of difference would there be with that than what you then, I know later on, went into RAD?
Much later on. I mean,
yes,
years and years later,
yes,
after I'd left the theatre.
I'm
yes.
aware of that, but was there, how would you describe the difference in his classes to what you sort of see today, or what was it that was so inspiring in his classes?
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed in all through my career when I've been to so many other people's classes is that, you see, he didn't have this terrible set bar that I don't like. And Preobrazhenska had a set bar, because I was there for 2 years after he died, and Itzikovsky had a set bar. But he never had a set bar. See, everything was different every day. And I think that was a wonderful training for the brain.
Yes.
And then, of course, everything you did, literally everything you did, you reversed. And you just reversed it. I mean, he'd say, reverse. And you just did it. I mean, you didn't stop and think what reverse was. You just did it.
So you became a dancer who was extremely versatile and could pick up very fast.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he liked me because I had naturally very large elevation, quite naturally. And so he always said, dance with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
So I always danced with the boys when it got to Allegro.
And were his classes more suited to boys, considering he was a man, or were his classes just
Well, no,
as good
because
for
he
women?
changed. No, they were. I think they were good for all of us. He had various sort of, even then, slightly old-fashioned ideas, and he didn't like any female doing more than a double pirouette. He disliked a nice, clean double. No more.
Mm-hmm.
More pirouettes are for the boys. And of course, the other thing that is so typical of the Legat method is that nothing stays the same. I mean, the music tempo changes, there's odd phrasing.
Which he, of course, was so able to do with playing the piano in his classes.
Absolutely. And he also, but he didn't play sort of great sort of virtuoso pieces. He played little tunes. I always remember, some of them I remember. One I always remember in particular, for Ronde de Jean Martyr, he always played Glow, Little Glowworm, Glimmer, Glimmer.
That didn't come out of Russia.
Da 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 dee da 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 dee da.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he made it fun too.
And he made it fun, and of course he changed it, and he improvised on the tune, but he didn't play great music. And he played little Russian tunes, and but it was all inspiring. It was also totally suitable. And of course we had this wonderful studio at 46 Gardens, which is now part of the Royal Ballet School, and so there was masses of space, and a lovely soft wood floor, which was duly watered by him every morning. And I also have a memory of him, which didn't happen in the afternoons, but when I went to the morning class, he always went up to Barons Court Station, which was sort of just up there, up the hill, and bought himself a great big bunch of flowers, which he would come proudly down to the studio and arrange them in a vase and put them on the piano. And then he would get the watering can out and he would water the floor.
Which they don't know today.
They don't know anything about that today.
No, they don't at all.
And of course he had apart from all the professionals that went, I should also say that when the Russians were in town, I mean, one saw Tumanova and Danilova and Nemchinova and such like ballerinas.
That must have been exciting too.
I mean, they weren't there all the time.
No,
they
but
only
they
came.
came sometimes.
And of course, there was Anne Northcote. Anne Northcote was there most of the time. And a lot of the people from the Imperial Ballet, which had just formed, Dorian didn't come to class, but he used to come and visit quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember ever seeing Mark over there, but I mean, I may be wrong there. Mona Egglesby had private lessons. She never came to class.
Well, there certainly were all
But
of the dancers
everybody
of the
was
day.
there. Oh, and people like Pearl Argyle, who died tragically so young after she had a baby. I don't know what happened to her, but she got herself back into practice of Pravishanskas, and then the next moment she seemed to be dead. So I don't actually know what happened to her, but she was a beautiful dancer. Claire Nordy was also there. You know, one can go on and on and on and on and on with all the names, if I could possibly remember them all, and I'm sure I've left people out, and I'm sorry.
What do you particularly remember about his classes? What do you think for you was the strong point in his class?
The use of the floor.
Or jumps, in other words. Yes.
Well, in everything,
Yes.
floor pressure. The importance of demi-plie, the use of using your plie always going in and coming out and never stopping, which I find in a lot of Western training doesn't exist. It's go plonk and stop, which of course you should never. You go down like a piece of elastic and come up again. And the control of the balance by the shoulders. And this is something that I've used in all the years of my teaching, whatever syllabi I've been involved in, or have to be involved in to earn a living. Yes, because that's another story that I will come to later, is that nobody seems to think that the top of the body has anything to do with anything, but of course it has everything to do with it. It has to do with pirouettes, it has to do with how you balance, how you center your weight. It's all to do with where your shoulders are and what you're doing with your back, because after all, our balance is all centered in the central muscles of our back, and we don't control those, we have nothing. So those are the three things that have stayed with me, besides of pirouettes, which I still use. I use all these things today, and I always have. They're the main things that I remember, because after all, I was only 13 when he died.
But on the other hand, it's an extremely impressionable age.
Well, I suppose it must have been, because I cannot really imagine how much I actually absorbed of his teaching at such a young an age. Because I was fairly advanced. I mean, on the side I was sort of doing RAD exams rather badly, because I mean, I was no more RAD than Fly to the Moon, nor was my teacher. But I did manage to pass the things. And I mean, I passed my elementary when I was 9, and my intermediate when I was 11, and my advanced when I was 13, all of which I had achieved while he was still alive. And I did that by practicing their syllabi at home in my practice room, and having one lesson a week.
With him?
No, one lesson a week with my
with
old
your own
teacher.
Yes, I get you, yes.
And I don't think, you know, in all fairness to her, bless her, she's long since left this life, I don't think she knew syllabus much better than I did.
Yeah.
So I didn't do very well. I just
That
scraped through all
wasn't
my
as
exams.
established either at that
But
time, was it?
although I didn't do very well in my exams, I remember a rather interesting situation. When I took my advanced, one of the examiners was Phyllis Bedell's, and she had watched lots of Legat classes. And the one thing I remember about that exam was, and she said, calling me by name, She said, now, I don't want any doubles today, just a single will do. Talking about pirouettes. And you see, I was doing double pirouettes and I was doing 32 fauteuils and all sorts of things by this time.
Yes.
I don't know how well I did them, but I mean, I was doing them, yes. So, you see, well, I think Alan Carter and I had far more technique for our generation at the age we were than a lot of other people. But we weren't the only ones. There were others.
So, can I ask you also, I think many people know that Legat was extremely good at doing drawings and caricatures. Were you aware of his other talents?
Oh yes, I was, because we had caricatures all around the room. And you know, when we were looking at that exhibition in Vancouver last year, was it last year?
Yes, it was last year. Yeah.
You know, all those caricatures of Richardson and Haskell and there's one of them, Shinover, isn't there?
Yes.
And they were all round the studio. And his animal drawings and everything was
because
there.
Because he was really very accomplished.
Absolutely accomplished.
Yes, and he played piano. He was really a more like a Renaissance man, wasn't he?
Yes,
in the sense
he was.
He was.
It was very sad, I think, very sad that that he was a victim of the revolution.
Yes. Because
after all, he was very important in Russia. He was a student of Christensen, and he'd carried on the Christensen method, and he was teaching all the ballerinas in Russia. I mean, he taught Pavlova, he taught Kasavina.
Yes.
I wonder if people realise
to be displaced like this into another completely different world.
And have a hodgepodge of students. I mean, after teaching the top dancers of the St Petersburg Ballet, as it said was, to come down to teach all these
9-year-olds, and nothing against you, but
no, but I mean the whole thing,
yes.
And then it wasn't only that. I mean, he did have the professionals in there. He hated the English school. He absolutely hated the English school. He told me when that several times that you will not go to the Wells. No, you will not go to the Wells, because by this time June Bray had gone to the Wells and Alan Carter had gone to the Wells. And he said, you will not go, you will go to the Russians. And you see, he arranged for me to dance with the Basil Company when I was 12. So it was in 1935. And I danced, there was a girl at the studio then, her name was Sonia Edelberg. And she was a great friend of Danilova's, personal friend. I don't know what nationality she was actually, because she spoke Russian. And Edelberg doesn't sound very Russian, so it must have been something else as well. And she took me up to the Royal Opera House and presented me. There's rather an interesting anecdote about a follow-through over that one, actually. So I went up there, and they said, oh, you're going to dance in La Concurrence. In Spanish, it's La Concurrence. Have you seen the ballet? I said, no. Have you heard the music? No. Oh, dear. Oh, well, we will sing. Sing. So we went, you don't know this story, I was wondering.
No, I don't.
So I was taken up into the rehearsal room at the top of the theatre there, which is still there. And somebody came up and sang and taught me what I had to do, which was quite difficult. It was on point, that was no problem to me, but it had a hoop. I don't know if you know this ballet, but this child, you had this hoop, and it's because it's a sort of Edwardian is the sort of era of the ballet, and a stick, you see, because of course in those days the children hit hoops with sticks. And I had to come on and I had to hit it across the stage, and I was quite sure that it would go into the harp on that side and into the drum on that side.
A bigger problem than doing the dancing.
Oh, much. And so Ladre, who was to play my father in this ballet, came up to the rehearsal room and did the lifts with me. But that was it. I never heard the music. I'd never seen the ballet. And 2 nights later I was on.
Oh my goodness.
I had that one rehearsal up in that room with them singing.
That's amazing.
So so anyway, the hoop didn't go in the harp and it didn't go in the drum. I managed to hit it, but I'd never been on the stage. I'd never seen the stage.
That's unreal.
And I'm just wondering, and I look at some of my students of 12 now. Well, what would they do in circumstances like that? Well, anyway, Grigoriev, who was regisseur of the company, he was so pleased with me that he made me stay on for an extra curtain call. I was very proud because I had his name part. They called me Tatiana Shurina in that program. They always called
A
them
Russian name.
and I always called them Tatiana Shurina wherever they went all over the world. And I took the curtain call between Shabalevsky and Dumanova. So I had this name part. It was most exciting. Anyway, what I was going to say was that about 5 years ago, I was in London in the days when I was still a Royal Academy examiner. And Baranova is now very involved with the Academy, as I think everybody knows. And I went up to her and I said, "Madam Baranova, I'm sure you don't remember me." And I said, "When you were 13, I was the child in Concurrence." And she said, "Oh, yes, I do. I remember you very well." She said, "We all liked you so much."
Well, isn't that
So
nice?
wasn't that nice?
So did Nicholas Legat see that performance?
No, I don't think so.
think he did?
No, I don't think so. No. I don't think so. I danced it many times, but I don't think he ever came. But
Did he mix with the other people in the dance world in
No.
London at that time?
No.
He was
didn't.
really very
He
much on
was
his
very much on his own. I never saw him at any, well, I don't know, I was so young, I don't suppose I was at any functions, but I don't think so. I don't think he was ever involved in anything. I think he had a lot of problems. Seems to me that I've read somewhere, I can't remember where, that he tried to do various things and never got to.
No.
Auditioned somebody for something and was turned down. I don't know where I've seen that. I mean, it seems to me that he was not accepted, which was dreadful, absolutely terrible.
Well, I can imagine that because he was so foreign to the country and he didn't speak the language and probably, and I'm only assuming this, but probably wasn't very much liked by the British people who were trying to do something else. Would I be right?
I'm quite sure, yes. And you see, nobody liked, no, because I mean, I suffered from that to some extent because quite a number of years later, when I landed up in the Ballet Rambert, and she was very over, really, I mean, over sort of pleased with me, and she was going to take me, she was going to do this with me and that with me, and very flowery as she always was. But she never really liked me because she hadn't trained me, and I was Legat trained, and that
Bothered her.
Bothered her. It
Yes.
really bothered her.
I'm not overly surprised by that, but
No, and I think that there was a bit of, no, I don't know, I mean, if I'd been older, maybe other people who were older than I am are more aware of that than I was, but being such a young child, I was not aware of it.
But they did all come to his classes, all the
Oh
dancers.
yes, they all came, and they were all in company, so they must have snuck out.
Yes. They realised that he was...
Because most companies won't allow you to
No.
go outside and take classes, but they all came.
So they definitely all knew he was there. Yes.
Mm.
So you mentioned a little further back, you said about, I think, the connection between, or the lack of connection, whichever way you want to describe it, between the Royal Academy of Dance, which you became later an examiner, and you started to talk about, I think, the comparisons or differences between the two.
Well, of course, the Royal Academy has their whole system has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the days when I was taking my exam, it was I think most people. I don't think I'm being unkind, but I think most people feel that it was extremely stuck and undancing, and it was very Espinosa, and I know it was supposed to be Danish, but I always felt, as my experience grew as an older dancer, that it was more Espinosa than it was anything else. And some of the things that we were required to do were rather strange, very heavy, I might say. I mean, for instance, in the old advanced syllabus, which I did, I mean, it was things like 16 rondes en l'air, without putting a leg down. You know, it was very sort of thigh, and the amount of battery in the intermediate was unbelievable.
So you were really stressing a lot of certain muscles.
I think so.
There
was no sort of, there seemed to be so little musicality, although we did have, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, although we did have, Leighton Lucas wrote the music, and the music was much better then than it became in the interim period, and now it's much better again. You see, through the years, the Academy has changed vastly, and now it is much more international in the sense that it has Russian influence and has a lot of Cecchetti influence, and the use of port de bras and epaulement and all these things that, of course, are so important to the Russians has all crept in.
In other words, it's much more integrated today.
Yes. And it doesn't really matter today whether you what method you study. You're still ending up at the same place.
There was a difference, though, wasn't there, in the bar, in the sense of from Legat's to, say, the Royal Academy of that time. There was a difference in the exercises on the bar, wasn't there?
Not really. A difference in order.
When you said about the
yes,
muscles.
but there was a difference in order, and what was, you see, what I always found about Maestro's bars, they were so balanced. Now, Preobrazhenska's bar, I didn't think was balanced. It was a bit bash, 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 bash. She never looked at it anyway. She ignored her bar. She never looked at the bar. Well, not really. She turned around and said, ooh, every now and again to somebody, but she never really looked at
She watered her plants.
She watered her plants and fed the birds out of the window. That was her feeding time, or patted the dog, or got him some water, or did things like that on the bar. She never took much notice of her classes until they came into the centre. But Legat's bar was scientific.
His whole teaching method was really very scientific.
So, I mean, the point is that one did tendu with plie, and then you did a faster tendu, and then you did the dégagés, and then you did a rond de chambre No, you didn't. Then you did Batman Fondue. So there you are, getting your relaxation after the dégages. I think Nicolai followed the same pattern, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And so forth. And there's another interesting point he never did. He never did any stretching in his classes. Ever. He was supposed to have done that somewhere
Before.
else. Yes.
In other words, you prepared yourself to come
You
to class.
prepared yourself to come to class, and then you danced. And the bar lasted about 25 minutes, and then there were 3 adages. One using second position plie, one using first position plie, one using fifth position plie. And then there was all the center practice intermingled with pirouettes, tendu, frappe, fondue, Russian varied from day to day, petit battement, petit tour and things. That was always some nice exercises, and petit tour, finishing an arabesque with a penché or something. You know, everything had a beautiful finish to it. And it was
always very dancing.
Yes, and the thing is now that this is the sort of thing that the Royal Academy's brought in. Everything has a finish, a finale to it. I mean, in the higher levels.
So in other words, they've come around to.
Oh, it's completely
yes.
changed around. So I mean, people say to me, "How can you be involved?" And well, I didn't have any choice. I mean, my choice simply was I came to Canada in the McCarthy days. You could not mention Russian at all, otherwise you had the RCMP knocking at your door. And I was very aware of this. I had to keep very quiet. I was asked at the very beginning of the Legat Foundation to bring it to Canada, but politically I could not do it. I wanted to stay in Canada, so I went to Winnipeg, where I was offered a job with the company as ballet mistress and teacher and to teach in the school, and they taught RAD.
So that was it?
So that was it,
yes.
And I had a child support, so I had to earn my living, and there was absolutely no way that I could have sat out on my own and started to give Russian classes. And also there was a lot of so-called Russian going on at that time. That was nothing. It was just useless. I mean, if you didn't know what you were doing, you called it Russian.
Yes. Oh, really?
But that's what I thought it was.
Yes. But I'm sure you used what you knew in your teaching, regardless.
Of course I did, yes. I always did.
So
and of course I taught that method to the company.
Yes. So when you weren't
When I was not involved in a children's syllabus, I was teaching.
Yes.
What
and you didn't say what it was.
I didn't say what it was.
I understand you. It's hard for anybody today to understand that politically it was not a very good thing to do. No, it's very hard for them to understand that.
It was a very bad era. I mean, it was bad from every point of view. I didn't come to Canada to teach originally. I came to Canada to do choreography in 1950 and to get across the border, where I had a job waiting with the Agnes de Mille company. But she couldn't get me a working permit and I couldn't get in. And but when I arrived, I wasn't allowed to cross the border at all until I'd been here a year.
So
it was a very politically difficult era.
Yes, I can well believe it. Going back to that London situation, there was quite a large Russian community out of the emigres from the Russian Revolution.
And that's where...
And probably, is that where he was supported, do you think?
Oh, yes, definitely, because 46 Cardiff Gardens was the headquarters of the North Russian Association, as it was called. And he had space there and a studio there.
Did they give
And
him
they
that
built-
studio, do you think? He didn't pay rent or
I
anything,
don't
did he?
think so.
You don't
I
think
don't
so?
think
No.
so. And then they built him the stage, so we
Oh,
had
they
a
did have
place
a
to
stage?
perform. Oh yes.
You know, I didn't know that.
Yes,
No.
we had a stage. Not at the beginning. We had because when I first went there, he did a performance at the Scala, which I don't remember an awful lot about, except I remember that Jack Spurgeon and Stanley Judson danced it. I wasn't allowed to because I wasn't 12. You couldn't dance in a public performance without a license in those days. So I wasn't in that. But then later, the stage was built. He didn't benefit too much from that stage, but Nicolai did because we did performances there.
Did he, because Legat ever put on performances there?
Seems to me he might have put on one, but I don't remember.
Because he actually did choreograph too, didn't he, in Russia? So did he didn't ever...
He choreographed for this thing at the Scala, but you see, he just wasn't accepted.
No.
That was the whole problem.
What a waste.
Terrible waste.
Terrible waste.
And then, but what I was going on about this Russian Association, we always had this wonderful party on Russian New Year every year, and there was a group of them that had a balalaika orchestra, and they used to play, and they used to sing and play, and then some of us would dance. And the last one, January 1937, which was just before he died, he came up and Alan Carter did his first choreography with me, on me. We did this pas de deux, very ambitious it was, pas de deux, and 2 variations and a coda.
Oh my goodness.
All to Brahms waltzes rehearsed to a gramophone.
With a wind-up.
With a wind-up, yes.
Hard to believe today.
Yes. And we did this in 1937 for him. And strange enough, I was asking Alan a few years ago about it, and he said, "Don't remember anything about it." I said, "Well, you should do. It was most successful." And Master was very impressed with it.
So he did do the odd thing like that for the Russian organization, but...
Yes, but it was this was Alan's choreography.
Yeah, it was Alan,
it was his choreography, and it was his first attempt.
Oh, really?
And
he must have been very young.
15.
Oh my goodness.
He was 15 and I was 12.
My goodness me. Well, that would have been quite an undertaking, and especially when
Was
you
it?
think
Yes. Yes, and so, and he was very bony, and he had all these lifts in it, and fishes on knees.
So somehow you learned to do those things, even if Nicholas Legat didn't have how to do it classes.
Well, it's because we used to go to the ballets,
And you'd see it.
and we'd see it, and we all had photographic memories.
Yes.
So we would come back to the studio, and we would rehearse the Sleeping Princess pas de deux, and the Act 2 Swan Lake pas de deux, and we'd do it. And of course, we could always practice in the studio after class.
You could use it whenever you went.
Well, yes, and then of course, I learned to balance in that studio because I learned to balance by balancing, so that I could stand on point on one leg for umpteen seconds at a time. And I did it in front of a mirror by myself.
So in other words, you don't think that Nicholas Legat had very much of a private life in those days? He didn't have friends outside of it, or he didn't...
I think he had a few Russian friends. I think that Vladimir Launitz was around, and then there were several Russians that used to sort of hang around the place. And I believe, wasn't it you yourself who told me that he stayed with this family at one College Gardens?
Yes, down the street.
Down the street.
He didn't have very far to go, luckily.
No.
No, the
Well,
Vladimirovs.
The Vladimirovs,
That's where he lived.
Yes, well,
He
they
had one
were
room in a house, right?
Yes, the Vladimirovs were there. He also had a room in 46 College Gardens.
Did he? I don't know that.
Yes, he
I'm not
did.
aware of that.
He did have a room, because he died in 46 Covent Gardens. He had a room on the ground floor. You went in the front door. I think it's all changed now.
I'm not familiar with 46 Covent Gardens. I'm familiar with one Covent Gardens where he lived.
Yes, well, 46 Covent Gardens, which is now the Royal Ballet School, because now when you go to the Royal Ballet School, you don't go in that door, you go in an entrance to an extension down there. You used to go in the front door, and there were double doors. There's a sort of suite on the right-hand side of the front door, with double doors, and he had that room.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went upstairs, and we had a big room that had a curtained-off wash basin, and which was the dressing room. And I don't know where the boys changed. There must have been another room for them, because we had lots of male students.
Well, I mean, pre-reject, because there wasn't exactly places to change and so on, so it probably was a little like that too. Things weren't quite the same as they are today, right?
No.
No, definitely not. They weren't the conveniences.
No, and we didn't have showers.
No.
First time I ever saw a shower anywhere was when I went to Copenhagen to dance professionally, and we rehearsed at a place, and they had showers.
We were absolutely amazed. So,
we're lucky if there was a little thing of water anywhere.
Yes, I know.
Perpetenskas, of course, it was just the
Nothing.
floor toilets.
Nothing.
Pull the plug and take a grand jeté out before you got wet.
Oh dear. We can laugh about this. We're old enough to laugh about some of these things. You went on to dance in the Red Shoes, and Moira Shearer was the lead dancer in that. Now, Moira, was she at Nicholas Legat's at that time, although she's, I think, a little younger.
Yes, she is younger than I am. She came, I was about 3 years younger. She came just before he died. And she was about 9 at the time. I think she says this in her book, doesn't she? I don't know, I'm a bit confused about Moira, because I never remember her having much to do with Legat. I think she came only a very short while before he died, and yet somewhere she's written that he arranged a dance for her.
Oh, really?
But I can't remember where I saw that. But I didn't realise he'd ever done anything for her. He felt she was a bit young to do anything.
She was very young, yes.
And well, she was young when she did Red Shoes too, and she was.
Did she have any? I mean, at 9 years of age, I don't know whether you could tell her, but did she have some kind of aura about her at that point?
Well, not to me,
really.
she didn't. No. And her ambition at that point, which is a funny joke actually, now is that all she wanted to do was be able to dance like me.
Oh, really? That's a nice compliment.
She told me that many years later when she was ballerina of the I don't think it was the Royal at that point, but it was that one anyway, that company. She said, oh, I only ever wanted to dance like you when I was little.
So in other words, I think I can say Nicholas Legat had quite an effect on your life.
Oh, an enormous effect. I mean, I think he was the greatest influence of anybody. I mean, I've learned things from other people through the years, and for choreographers I've worked with. I've worked with Marcin, I've worked with Walter Gore and Frederick Ashton and names escaping all the time. Andre Howard. Victor Gazovsky, Knazev. Zverev was quite interesting in Paris. We did a lot of the old ballets from Russia. Lemshinov's husband, Zverev. But that company went bankrupt, so never performed any of these wonderful things we rehearsed. Because we had Knazev, Gazovsky and Zverev as ballabusters in that company and 56 dancers, and it was all so ambitious. And we went out on our first tour and went bankrupt.
Yes. No, well, that's just another sad story of the ballet.
Well, I mean, it was the sad story of that era. I mean, everything started off with great aplomb and then went bankrupt.
So how do you, for instance, today, I mean, I'm going to sort of jump the generations a little bit just to finish up. How do you see the ballet then, in those days, and you see the ballet today when you go to the ballet? What do you feel is the difference, or is there a difference? How do you look at it today?
I think actually at this particular point in time, it's getting better again. I think it went through I don't know how to explain it, I suppose I shouldn't talk like this, but you see, to me, the Russians had it all.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, looking back, you think of the Defection Company and some of the older corps trotting on in Swan Lake was not very good. So technically there were things, but they had an aura about them, and it didn't. All these wonderful ballets they did. I mean, things like Scheherazade and Tamar and all the fun ones, and they were all great artists. And as far as I was concerned, when the Wells started off at the beginning of the war, well, I mean, they started off long before that, but when they sort of came out of the Sadler's Wells Theatre into the West End, I mean, I wouldn't have crossed the road to see them. I mean, they were so boring and didn't have any service or any good at all, as far as I was concerned. I mean, in those days. And then they got better. And then the American companies seemed to be all legs up in the air and no allegro and no soul and nothing at all. But I think it's sort of, I think everything is getting a little bit more musically conscious, I think, and more soulful. I don't know what the word is I want. I think the dancers, I think they're realizing that it's a little bit more than technique. There's more to it than that.
That's what people like Danilova, etc. had, right?
Yes, they had no technique whatsoever.
But they had tremendous personalities.
Absolutely tremendous personalities.
Yes. And that we seem to have lost?
Well, I think we lost it for a long time, but I think it's beginning to come back now. I think it's, I don't know, that's the feeling I have, that there is more, the audience is more conscious. I think they're also very conscious of tricks. I mean, if anybody does anything, I get very sick of North American audiences every time anybody does a grand pirouette, which after all everybody's done in class for hundreds of years. They applaud it as if it's the biggest fake that's ever been done, which is totally ridiculous.
But they don't realize how something very simple. And what I got out of what you were saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, but Nicholas Legat, it was the beauty of it rather than
It's the beauty of it, the musicality of it, and it was what you did from the waist up, and what you did with your face, and where your eye line was, which, fortunately for me, having to teach at the Royal Academy, is now so conscious of eye line, that if people haven't got eye line, and if they're not presenting their work, they don't do very well in their exams.
Oh, that's interesting. And nice to hear.
And very nice to hear. And all the higher grades that they've brought in now are very, well, they're all based on an era. So you get the introduction of the Romantic era in grades 6 and 7. 8 is a bit of a mixture of a bit of everything, but that's still a bit romantic. But you're teaching children the romantic style, and they are expected. I mean, the music is based on the old romantic ballads, Balladet and so forth. And
So I'd like to think, and I'm sure you would, that Nicholas Legat would be happy to see that.
I think he'd be very happy to see it because he was very anti what was going on in England in his life.
Good, and thank you, because obviously you contributed to that, and I hope your pupils will continue that.
So do I.
And it was lovely talking to you, Joy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.